Dear learners, in this episode we are going to learn about impact of tourism. This includes introduction, economic impact, measurement of economic impact, socio-cultural impact and ecological and environmental impact. Tourism has become second largest industry in the world in terms of creating employment and generating income. For more than 60 countries, it is the main source of foreign exchange earner. The economy of many countries mainly depend on international tourism. Tourism contributes a very high percentage of GDP for those countries. For example, Maldives mainly depend on international tourism. There are no industries and nothing is grown there. Tourism contributes about 94% of its GDP. The significance of tourism has been recognized both in developed and developing countries. There is a widespread optimism that tourism might become a powerful and beneficial agent of both economic and social change. Indeed, tourism has really stimulated both investment and employment. The tremendous growth of tourism has prompted perceptive observers about the social and environmental desirability of encouraging further expansion of tourism. How far the expenditure on tourists really benefits the locals in the long run? Does tourism rejuvenate the traditional art and craft of the host community? Should the government give priorities to satisfy the need of tourists rather than the local community? Are there saturation levels behind which further growth in tourism will have negative impact? The unprecedented growth in tourism in some regions or countries has prompted a host of such questions. As tourism continues to expand, questions regarding economic, social, cultural and environmental aspects of tourism has started emerging, and both government and concerned people have started finding answers for such questions. Research on tourism has been highly fragmented. There have to be a systematic study on different aspects of tourism on the life of local community. Until recently, attention was concentrated only on economic impact, with little consideration on socio-cultural and ecological and environmental impact of modern tourism growth. Recognition of negative impact of tourism on local community has given serious consideration by both government and environmentalists. Evaluation of negative impact of tourism has forced many governments to pass legislation to protect the environmental degradation from tourism project. Second heading is economic impacts of tourism growth. Much of the literature focuses on economic and social benefits of tourism. The positive effects are commonly accepted as increase in total income for the local community, direct and indirect employments and increased foreign exchange earnings. Social benefits include educational, scientific and aesthetic advantage of cross-culture contacts. During the last 2 decades, there have been considerable debates on the social and cultural impact of tourism. While there are specific methods to measure the economic impact, but it is very difficult to measure socio-cultural impact. In assessing the socio-cultural impact of tourism, the nature and value system of local community have to be considered. The family type, the social habits, the customs and traditions of the local community have to be studied. All countries have agreed that tourism is good for their economic development. That is the major reason that they aggressively promote tourism. Simple method of measuring the impact of tourism is counting international arrivals and foreign exchange receipts. The economic impact of tourism may be broadly classified into direct and indirect. These effects are most intensively researched area of tourism analysis. Most of the research study is concentrated on local area and mainly in developed countries. But in general, the findings are applicable to most of the countries, both developed and developing. There are some of the important factors that influence directly the economic activity in the country. They are how much do tourists spend in that area, the expenditure by foreign visitors becomes export for the host country. Second is how many additional jobs are created through the tourist expenditure. Next is variety of tourism economic impact. Tourists contribute to sales, profits, new jobs, revenue to the government and overall economic development of that area. The most direct effect occur within the primary tourism sectors like accommodation, sales of food and beverages, transportation, recreation, amusements, retail trade and other related tourism service industry. The secondary effect is that the tourism affects most sectors of the economy. An economic impact analysis of tourism activity focuses on changes in sales, employment, income in a region resulting from tourism activities. Next is direct, indirect and induced effects. A standard economic impact analysis traces flow of money from tourism spending first to business and government agencies and then to other sectors of economy. The economist distinguishes between direct, indirect and induced economic effects. The direct effect is called as primary effect, while indirect and induced effects are called as secondary effects. The total economic impact of tourism is the sum total of both primary and secondary effects within a region. Any of these impacts may be measured as gross output or sales. Direct effects are reflected in production changes associated with the immediate effect of changes in tourism expenditure. For example, an increase in the number of tourists staying overnight in hotel would directly yield increased sales in the hotel sector. The additional hotel sales and associated payment for wages, salaries, taxes and for other services are the direct effect of tourist spending. Indirect effects are the production changes resulting from various rounds of re-spending by the primary beneficiaries. For example, change in the sales in the linen supply industries. It represents indirect effect of changes in the hotel sales. Business supplying materials and services to the linen industries represents another round of indirect effects. Induced effects are the changes in economic activities from household spending of income earned directly or indirectly as a result of tourism spending. For example, hotel and linen supply employees supported directly or indirectly by tourism spend their income in the local region for their various needs like food, clothing, transportation, etc. The sales, income and additional jobs that results from household spending of additional income of workers are induced effects. By means of indirect and induced effects, changes in tourism spending can impact virtually every sector of the economy in one way or the other. Third one, Measurement of economic impact of tourism. Several standard types of economic measurement are made in tourism, but in many countries tourism is not listed as a separate sector in the national economy, but it is included in the service sector. The UNWTO has developed the standard international classification of tourism activities, which has been approved by the United Nations Statistical Commission. There are some standard sets approved by the Commission. They are as follows. The first one is income generated by tourism activities and contributed to national income or GDP. Second, foreign exchange earned from international tourism. Third, local employment generated by tourism activities. This includes both direct and indirect impact. People employed in travel agencies, tour operators, hotels, restaurants, retail businesses, handicrafts, artists, paintings and other related tourism business. Indirect employments in supporting industries like infrastructure, roads, buildings, bridges, etc. The multiplier effect. This refers to the stimulus that an external source of income has on the economy. It is the number of rounds of spending in the local economy of the initial tourist spending. This measures the way in which tourist expenditure filters through the economy and generates multiple economic activities. Fifth one is contribution to government revenue. This includes various types of taxes paid by the tourist. The exact measurement of economic impact is relatively a difficult task. However, we can try to get the answers for the following questions. They are: how much money does the tourist spends? It normally depends upon the economic position of the tourist. What is the length of his stay? Longer the stay, higher will be the amount spent. What is the increase in the sales for the local people? How many additional jobs are created on account of tourism? What is the additional net income? How much additional tax, it can be both local or state government, gets? Next is economic impact studies. Economic impact studies in travel and tourism are undertaken to determine the effect of specific activities in a given geographical area on income, wealth and employment of the local community. These studies are undertaken in a particular destination for a particular period. Generally, 1 year. The result indicates the contribution or the cost of tourism activities to the economic well-being of the local community, usually in a monetary terms. It shows increase or decrease in the people of the area. In the broadest sense, economic impact studies can indicate the gross increase or decrease in the wealth of the community in that destination. Usually, it is decided by the spending of the travelers in the destination. Economic impact studies should include both direct and indirect impacts. This diagram shows direct and indirect impact of tourism. Direct impact includes hospitality industry, travel agency and tour operators, tourist guide, local artisans, amusement parks, hawkers and peddlers. Indirect impact includes construction industry, maintenance industry, transport, land, air or water, general trade, specialty business and government all comes under indirect impact. Fourth one, socio-cultural studies. Since a decade or two, development planners, economists and sociologists have increasingly questioned the real economic benefit of tourism. there have been a large number of studies on the impact of mass tourism on society, culture and environment of the host country. Significantly, the concern came from developed countries where scenic sites, historical monuments and recreational centers were endangered. For example, a sudden explosive expansion of tourism caused grave concern about Alps in Switzerland and Austria. The negative impact of tourism on Japanese mountain, the fragile island and ecosystem of Hawaii and Puerto Rico has caused much concern on planners of sustainable tourism development. The concern for the tourism impact is slowly increasing in developing and developed countries as well. Next is problem of tourism growth. While tourism helps the economy and society, it also creates a number of social problems. In some developing countries, premature exposure to Western ideas and technologies has created a variety of social problems. The introduction of tourism to new region inevitably altered the routine life of the people. In certain countries, rapid tourism development contributed to high crime rate. The following are the important socio-cultural problems created by tourism growth. The first one is land use. When tourism has to be expanded, naturally more land is required. The farmers refuse to give their cultivable land for developing new destinations. For example, in Karnataka, for developing a new airport near Bellary, the farmers refused to surrender their cultivable land. Similarly, in Haryana, the government wanted to develop a new destination on the Disneyland model, for which it wanted 1000 acres of agricultural land. The Haryana farmers went on agitation and finally the government dropped the idea of new project. Second is conflict between tourist and local community. The hostility between tourist and local community may arise because of ethnic problems, traditions, language, dress, social practices and cultural traditions. This may strain the relation between the locals and tourists, particularly in developing countries. Resentment to tourists may also grow because of limited use of resources and infrastructure facilities to be shared between locals and tourists. Third one, change in the social habits. There will be sudden change, particularly among the younger generations in terms of dress, social behavior and to some extent even vulgarization in their conduct. Fourth one, dislocation of traditional jobs. There can also be extensive dislocation of lifelong individual economic activity. The earliest documented example was on the impact of life of Mexican farming and fishing community whose lands were acquired for tourism development. This resulted in the local community depending totally on the income from tourism. In order to get quick money, the local residents may give up their traditional jobs and work in the tourism industry to get easy money. Tourism in Ladakh has seriously affected agriculture. Fishing in the coastal area of Goa is also affected due to influx of large number of tourists. Fifth one, unethical activity. Tourism also brought with it all the modern style of massage centers, gambling, theft, robbery and even prostitutions. This is very much visible in Thailand. Although prostitution is an ancient phenomenon and this service catering to travelers date back to centuries, but today it has reached a stage where services are fully packed and sold. For example, in 2005, more than 1 million Japanese tourists visited Thailand, Philippines, South Korea and Hong Kong on tours called Trips for Men Only. prostitution resulting from tourism has reached crisis level in countries like Thailand, Nepal, Vietnam, Caribbean islands and parts of East Africa. It has taken a shape of organized industry. Unfortunately, in some countries, even the government encourages sex tourism because of foreign exchange. Sixth one, decay of local culture. Tourism has undoubtedly contributed much to the widening of mental horizon, particularly in Europe. Very little cross-cultural fertilization have been achieved. There is visible evidence in some South Asian and ASEAN countries where tourism has had a negative impact on local culture. It is impossible to ignore the political implications of tourism, which creates a neo-colonialism. Tourism has made culture as a commercial commodity. Music, dance, ceremonies, rituals and traditions have become marketable commodity and lose relevance to the local people. This may result in lowering the dignity of the local community and watering down their customs and traditions. Next is rift in the family. Because of tourism, the younger generations may get easy money. It may result in spending more money on undesirable purpose. The younger people may not listen to the advice of the elders. This leads to more misunderstanding and rift in the family. Next is tourism and crime. It is apprehended that tourism generates crime. Many researchers have perceived a positive correlation between tourism and crime. In underdeveloped and developing countries where unemployment is high, the younger generation finds it more lucrative to rob the tourists in different ways. In many African countries, the tourists are robbed at knife point, in beaches or in other destinations even during the daytime. Another important aspect of crime is related to illegal poaching of animals. The ivory of elephant, claws of tiger, skin of tiger and other animals are in great demand. The locals may smuggle these items and sell it to tourists for a very good price. Next is socio-political consequences. The socio-political impact of tourism outweighs the economic benefits in many developing as well as developed countries. Many citizens fear serious socio-political consequences from the economic disparity caused by the creation of wealth accumulation in the hands of a few in the midst of a large number of poor people. Fifth one, ecological and environmental impact. Tourism development has experienced tremendous expansion in the last 2 decades. The growth of tourism development has brought a wide variety of impacts ranging from economic, social, cultural, ecological and environmental problems. While the overall environmental impact is probably less than that of most of the other manufacturing industries developed on a smaller scale, still its negative impact has to be seriously viewed and stopped. Massive and intensive development of tourism in some countries are ringing an alarm bell. Unless we decide and take up corrective steps in the beginning stage only, it may lead to disastrous consequences. Environment, whether natural or man-made, is essential component of tourism. Modifications are inevitable for a tourism development, but these modifications shall be done aesthetically and within the permissible limit. We can use all resources at present, making full provision for future use by our next generations. As tourism moves into 21st century, the enterprise will have to make the protection and conservation of ecology and environment top priority. Because of fast development, the tourism is occupying a center place in the planning and development many countries of the world. Tourism is not only a powerful economic force, but a force in a physical environment as well. Projects that are economically beneficial but environmentally not desirable may not be taken up. Profitably in tourism depends upon maintaining the sustainability of attraction of the destination. It is being recognized that tourism must preserve and protect the environment so that people will continue to travel and enjoy the destination for a long time. Tourism has the power to enhance the environment, to provide funds for conservation, to preserve culture and historical monuments, and to protect natural attractions. At the same time, if tourism is not properly planned and developed, it can also destroy vegetation, create overcrowd little trekking areas, pollute beaches, eliminate open spaces, create sewage problems, and result in catastrophic consequences. Therefore, more and more emphasis is being placed upon proper planning in the destination development. Countries and regions have started seeking protection of their environment and values from influx of mass tourism. It does not mean that we should stop the development of tourism, but basically it means that a proper balance has to be maintained between the growth of tourism and the protection of ecology and environment. It is being recognized all over the world that tourism must preserve, conserve and protect ecology and environment and natural attraction to make it sustainable. Many countries have developed new concepts such as ecotourism, nature tourism, responsible tourism, carrying capacity concept of tourism development, etc. The World Travel and Tourism Council has issued a position statement in which it has examined various negative aspects of tourism and focused on its seriousness. It mainly stressed on global warming, depletion of ozone layer and pollution. Next is the aesthetic of environmental quality. Tourists are attracted to destinations of higher environmental quality. Many top ranking destinations in the world are blessed with a variety of natural attractions such as tropical climate, unspoiled beaches, forest, countryside breathtaking mountains with green grasslands, unpolluted and pure coastal water, bewitching backwaters, fresh water flowing rivers, lush green vegetation and other scenic landscapes. There are other types of destinations that are known for their ethnic diversity, arts and crafts. Therefore, all efforts should be made to see that tourism is developed on sustainable basis. Conclusion: the impact of tourism can be positive or negative. It is the major social phenomenon of the society. It is an instrument for economic growth and development, employment opportunities and income generation, but it can also be the reason for the destruction or alteration of natural resources. Care must be taken by the host region to maintain and develop the resources of that region. Thank you.